The savanna stretched endlessly beneath the fading light, the tall grasses swaying gently in the breeze, their rustling sound barely noticeable against the growing silence. The lion, a powerful creature whose name echoed through the land like a distant thunderclap, lay still on the earth, his tawny coat blending with the golden hue of the grass. His chest rose and fell with labored breaths, slow and uneven. There was no grandeur in his pose, no dominance in his stillness. Only a quiet, unsettling vulnerability. It was not the peace of rest, but the stillness of something more painful, a warning barely whispered by the land around him. The observer stood at the edge of the clearing, a figure barely more than a shadow against the darkening landscape. He had been watching the lion for some time, his gaze steady, his thoughts calm but deeply troubled. The savanna was a land of predators and prey, but even among such fierce life, something about this moment felt different. The lion's body bore signs of recent struggle. Shallow scratches lined his shoulders, his limbs weak from the fight he had surely lost. His pride was nowhere in sight, and the man could feel the weight of that absence, the isolation in the lion's posture. It was a quiet surrender to the land, the animal's kingdom, where even kings could falter. The lion's amber eyes, once sharp and commanding, shifted slightly toward the man. The movement was subtle, almost imperceptible, but there was recognition in those eyes, not of the man as a threat, but as an observer. The pain in the lion's gaze was not one of fear, but of weariness, of a long, silent battle with something far greater than the injuries that marked his body. The man didn't move, didn't approach. He understood the boundaries between them, that even in moments like this, when the line between life and death blurred, respect was the only true currency of the wild. The lion's heavy breathing seemed to deepen as the evening shadows stretched further across the land. The warmth of the day began to retreat, leaving a cooler breeze in its wake. The stillness between them was thick with a quiet tension, the kind that told of stories never spoken, of survival hanging by the faintest thread. The man felt his pulse steady in his chest, as though his body had somehow synchronized with the lion's slow rhythm, both of them waiting for something, for a sign, a decision, a moment that would shift the course of things. Time seemed to slow as the lion's gaze wandered back toward the horizon, where the last light of day was dipping below the earth. His breath was shallow now, barely moving the air around him, but it was still there. The man took a small step forward, but there was no hurry in his movement. Only the quiet weight of the moment, of being present at the edge of something fragile, something that might slip away if forced or rushed. There was no comfort in this stillness, no reassurance. Only the vast, uncaring land stretching before them, where life and death danced in the same soft, unbroken rhythm. The lion's chest rose once more, slow and laborious, before his eyes closed again, his body surrendering to the pull of exhaustion. The savanna was quiet, but the air felt heavy with the question of what would come next. The man, without a word, turned and stepped back into the growing darkness, leaving the lion to his quiet struggle beneath the fading sky. As the last sliver of sunlight disappeared, the wind whispered through the grass, and the man disappeared into the shadows, his heart full of unanswered questions. The lion remained still and resolute as the night deepened around him. Minutes passed, though they felt like hours in the heavy stillness of the savanna. The lion made no attempt to move, his breath shallow and ragged, a stark contrast to the powerful, steady rhythm it once held. His left rear leg, once a symbol of strength and grace, now lay bent awkwardly beneath him, a silent testament to his struggle. The wind barely stirred the grass, and the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something, a sign, an answer, or perhaps an end. The lion's amber eyes, which had first shifted toward the man with a quiet acknowledgement, now remained fixed upon him. There was no fear, no aggression in the gaze, only something far more fragile, a quiet plea, a recognition of vulnerability, and an unspoken invitation for help. The man stepped closer, his heart racing in his chest. There was no dramatic urgency to his movements, only a calm urgency that had been honed over years of working with creatures of the wild. He could feel the weight of the moment, a connection forming between them, a silent understanding that seemed to pass between the man and the lion. Though he had faced countless moments of tension in the field, none had felt quite like this. The rawness of the situation was undeniable. The lion was not simply an animal in pain. He was a creature lost, a king whose kingdom had slipped from beneath him. The man knew the quiet truth that the lion's chances of survival alone were slim. He could feel it, the subtle shift in the air, the weight of the lion's gaze pressing upon him as if waiting, silently, for a decision. The savanna, so alive with the sounds of the day, now felt unnervingly quiet. Only the faint hum of insects in the grass broke the silence, a soft, distant sound that seemed to remind the man of the world that still moved around them, oblivious to the fragile situation at hand. The man knelt, his movements slow and deliberate, as though trying to match the lion's own unspoken patience. He spoke, his voice a mere whisper, a calm thread of sound that might have been carried away by the wind had it not been for the quiet of the moment. "It's okay, boy," he murmured, offering words of reassurance, though he knew the lion could not understand. It was a sound meant only to comfort, to bridge the gap between them. Years of experience with wildlife had taught the man the importance of patience, of listening without expectation, of offering quiet presence rather than forceful action. But this moment, this quiet, vulnerable exchange, was something different. The lion did not respond with fear or aggression, nor did he move away. He simply remained, accepting the presence of the man with a quiet understanding that mirrored his own. There was no struggle, no instinct to flee, just the silent bond that formed between them, built on a shared recognition of suffering and the mutual desire for survival. The man remained kneeling, his hand hovering just inches from the lion's fur, not daring to touch yet, waiting for a signal, for some kind of response. But the lion did not flinch. His body, though still tense, seemed to relax ever so slightly under the man's gaze. There was no movement beyond the faint rise and fall of his chest. The man's heart pounded, not from fear, but from the weight of the decision he knew he had to make. This was no longer just an observation. It was a quiet choice, a choice to intervene, to help, to reach across the divide between human and wild. The savanna stretched out around them, vast and unyielding. The man could feel the weight of its expanse, the silent pressure of time as the world around him continued on, unaware of the delicate bond that had just formed. The lion's gaze never left him, the connection between them deepening. And in that moment, the man knew that no matter the outcome, the decision had already been made. The lion had asked for help and he had answered. The man moved closer, his steps measured and slow, the dry grass crunching beneath his boots as he knelt beside the lion. His hands were steady, but his heart quickened in his chest, aware of the danger that always lingered when approaching a predator, especially one in such a vulnerable state. The lion was no longer the mighty hunter, the powerful force of nature that had once ruled the savanna. He lay there, still and weak, his body sagging with exhaustion, a creature stripped of its strength, a shadow of the king he had once been. The man could feel it, the weight of trust in the air, unspoken yet undeniable. In his pain, the lion had not lashed out or recoiled. Instead, he remained still, offering the man a quiet vulnerability, as if he knew that help, however rare, might be within reach. The lion's chest rose and fell, but it was no longer the deep, rhythmic rise of a healthy predator. Now there was a slight whimper, a low, mournful sound that escaped his lips. It was not a roar or a growl, but a sound born of pain and resignation. The man's throat tightened at the sound, but he did not falter. He knew this was a delicate moment, one that could tip either way, toward fear or toward trust. The lion's amber eyes, once sharp and commanding, softened in the man's presence, though they still carried the weight of untold stories. They flickered with something akin to gratitude, or perhaps an unspoken plea for relief. The man reached out, his hand hovering just above the lion's side. He moved slowly, carefully, uncertain of the lion's reaction but knowing that this moment was one of rare communion, a connection between species that could not be easily explained. The air between them was thick with the silence of the savanna, the faint hum of insects filling the space where words could not reach. With a tentative breath, the man lowered his hand just enough to brush the lion's side, his touch gentle, seeking only comfort. The lion's muscles tensed for a moment, the instinct to pull away flickering like a faint ember, but then something shifted. Slowly the lion adjusted his weight, his body allowing the man's touch. The tension in his frame eased ever so slightly as the man's warmth reached him. It was not the kind of touch that promised healing or quick answers, but it was a comfort, a small offering of peace in a moment of suffering. For a long moment they remained there, the man's hand resting lightly against the lion's side, offering the softest reassurance he could. There was no rush, no need for more. The lion did not move to fight, nor did he seek to flee. He allowed the man's touch, as if to acknowledge that in this brief moment, there was no need for fear or aggression. Only the quiet exchange of something deeper, trust, perhaps, or a shared recognition of vulnerability. The man stayed there, his heart beating steadily in the quiet of the savanna, knowing that he had entered a space where few ever ventured. It was a rare, fragile bond, born not of words but of presence. A moment suspended in time where two creatures, so different in form and life, shared the same breath. Hours slipped by, their passage unnoticed in the quiet weight of the moment. The man remained beside the lion, his presence unwavering, offering water and carefully tending to the deep wound on the lion's leg. It was a painful sight. The injury was severe, raw and jagged, perhaps the result of a fight with another predator or a cruel trap. The man worked with methodical care, his hands gentle as he cleaned the wound, ensuring that each movement was slow, deliberate. He knew that any sudden motion could break the fragile bond they had formed, the trust that was just beginning to settle between them. The lion, though clearly in pain, did not resist. His eyes were half closed, his body still, as if he understood the necessity of this human touch, as if he had reached a quiet decision to accept help in whatever form it came. There was no aggression, no defensiveness, only a deep, unspoken trust that grew stronger with every passing moment. The savannah stretched out around them, the day slipping into evening, but time seemed to slow within the circle of this delicate exchange. The man could feel his pulse steadying, but also a deep unease gnawing at him. It had been hours, and while he had done everything he could, the lion's condition still seemed dire. The weight of the situation hung in the air, the tension in the lion's body still palpable. The man had treated the injury with everything he had, but he knew that there was only so much he could do. His thoughts turned to the harsh realities of the wild. Survival was not guaranteed, no matter the efforts made. Just as the man began to wonder if he had done enough, if it was even possible for the lion to recover, the silence of the savannah was broken by a soft sound, a low, rumbling growl from the lion's throat. It wasn't the menacing sound of an alert predator, but something different. It was a sound born from deep within the lion, a low vibration that seemed to resonate with the land itself. The man's heart skipped a beat, unsure of what to make of the sound. The lion's eyes flickered open, their amber depths still clouded with pain, but something else was there now, a glimmer of strength, a quiet flicker of the life force that had once commanded the savannah. The man could see it, feel it in the air around them. The lion was not done yet. With a slow, hesitant movement, the lion shifted. The muscles in his legs trembled, but he pushed himself upright, his body straining against the pain, his weight shifting slowly as he stood. It was a tentative movement, unsure, but it was enough. The man held his breath, watching the lion's every motion, his heart swelling with a fragile hope. The lion's body swayed slightly, his legs still injured, but there was a quiet defiance in his posture, a will to rise despite the odds. The man stepped back, giving the lion space, his eyes fixed on the creature as he took this first fragile step toward recovery. For a long moment, they simply watched each other. The lion stood there, trembling, his breathing still uneven, but he was on his feet. There was no dramatic roar of triumph, no sudden burst of strength, just the quiet miracle of survival unfolding in real time. The savannah seemed to hold its breath, the soft rustle of grass the only sound in the growing darkness. The man felt a flicker of hope rise in his chest, a sense that perhaps this was not the end after all. Slowly, quietly, the lion had found the strength to stand, and in doing so, had reminded the man of something sacred, the resilience of life and the quiet power of trust. As the first light of dawn began to filter through the trees, casting a soft, golden glow across the savannah, the lion took his first tentative steps into the wild. The air was still cool, and the earth beneath his paws was damp with the night's remnants, but the lion moved with a newfound purpose. His limp, though still present, was less pronounced, the fluidity of his movement returning as strength gradually crept back into his limbs. His once dulled coat glistened slightly in the early light, the powerful muscles beneath it once again flexing with grace. For the first time in days, he moved with the unmistakable air of a predator, his head held high, his body more alert, more attuned to the world around him. He was no longer the broken creature of the previous days, but a king slowly reclaiming his throne. There was a quiet pride in his every movement, a subtle reminder of the strength that still lay beneath the surface. The man watched from a distance, his heart full of quiet pride and a deep sense of gratitude. He had been part of something sacred, a moment that could never be fully understood, a rare exchange where the boundaries between human and animal had blurred. In the few hours they had shared, something had passed between them, a connection forged not in words, but in mutual trust, in the recognition of vulnerability, and in the acceptance of help. The man knew that the lion's recovery was not a simple thing. It was a small miracle, a quiet triumph over pain and isolation. He had watched the lion's trust in him grow, and now, as the lion prepared to leave, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. His role had been to give the lion a chance, but it was the lion who had chosen to rise again. There was no grand gesture, no roar of victory, only this quiet departure as the lion took back his place in the vast, untamed world. As the lion reached the edge of the clearing, he paused for a brief moment, turning his head one final time. His amber eyes, still filled with the faint traces of pain but now steady with purpose, met the man's gaze. There was no need for words between them. No farewell, no gratitude to be expressed. Only an unspoken acknowledgement, a shared understanding that this moment, this bond, had been a fleeting but significant part of both their lives. The lion's gaze lingered for just a heartbeat, a silent thank you that needed no explanation. Then, with a soft growl, he turned away, his powerful body melting into the grass as he disappeared into the wild. The man stood still, his heart a little heavier but also lighter. The lion had given him something in return, a quiet reminder of the resilience of life, of the trust that can exist between species when the conditions are right. He watched as the lion's figure faded with the sunrise, swallowed by the vastness of the savanna, until only the rustling of the grass remained. The man's breath slowed as he took a deep, steadying breath, knowing that in this simple, unspoken moment, something extraordinary had happened. The lion was once again a part of the wild, where he belonged, and the man was left with the knowledge that he had been entrusted with a rare and precious moment. And though the lion had gone, the connection they had shared would remain, etched into the fabric of the land itself, quietly fading with the day.